there a better way to start this?
No.
Okay. Hi. Welcome to a special live episode of Commerce Chefs. We have the better half of the Commerce Chefs, Mr. Tom
Kyle
Halbert.
Duca.
Oh, that's right. Nice. Yeah, nice. Yeah, good. Okay, that's it. But the real guest, we've got Dan Park, the CEO of Clutch.ca. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
This will be good.
Yes,
and we
be
also
fun.
have like a few
live audience.
Yeah, live audience.
Fantastic.
It's like The Price is Right.
Absolutely.
Come on down. Okay. Not in the notes.
You get
okay.
a car. Everyone gets a car.
Oh.
There you go.
Imagine that.
Everybody here walked over the car.
You didn't know. Okay. So Dan is the CEO of Clutch.ca, and I've got that thing where I awkwardly introduce you, and you just
I'll just sit here.
You sit here,
I'll sit here.
and we just zoom in real close to your face.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. The CEO of Clutch.ca, also a venture partner at Azure Capital Partners. Previously, you were the GM and the head of Uber Eats Canada, among a laundry list, and I wrote that because I just couldn't keep up with the board member, everything that you're part of. I wrote, gives Elon a run for his money.
Yeah, I said that's not true. So.
But I think it's true, so I think I'm in. I'm good. Clutch.ca, though, outside of all the other things that you've done and accomplished, I want to focus on Clutch.ca for a second. For those maybe that are also maybe have not looked on the internet, it's a thing. Clutch.ca, Canada's first and largest online car retailer.
That's right.
Yeah, thousands of cars sold through a website.
Tens of thousands of cars sold through.
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
We will dig into that because I just want to appreciate that people don't buy cars through websites.
Yeah,
they do.
They do. It's funny. When I first kind of embarked on this journey, one of the questions, surveying people in the industry, hey, do you think people will buy cars online? And people are like, no, absolutely not. You have to test drive a car. But, I think you look back over the last 20 years around e-commerce generally, 15 years ago, buying a pair of shoes online was insane.
Yeah.
How could you buy a pair of shoes online without actually trying those on? A TV, I think, is the best example. You literally can't see the picture quality of the TV unless you go see that TV in person.
Yeah.
You can't see the picture quality of a TV on another TV. And so that's happening online. And so I think naturally most things can move online. Real estate's moving online, and the second largest purchase you'll make for most people will be a car. And I think if you deliver the transparency, the details, again, 10 years ago, buying a diamond online was insane. So, the stretch now to buy a car online isn't actually that crazy.
That's wild. Okay, we're going to dig into more of that. The other piece that we're going to dig into, because apparently you've know a bit about raising capital. Clutch has raised over $200 million in capital to launch some explosive growth. That's a few $1 million. I don't know if anybody in the room is interested in $200 million, but if you are, we'll talk about that.
Yep.
And then the other thing, I just need to throw this in because this might be the most important piece for everyone in the room. As very loyal Canadians, you guys are now partnered with the NHL.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. Officially used car retailer. I can talk about that because I think that's an important piece of it as well. Because from a brand perspective, and I can talk about trust because trust is such an important piece of a large purchase item. And one of those things and one of the decisions we made early on was look, we need a partner that can help us build that trust as we build our product, as we build our following. That was an important partnership.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, we're going to dig in.
Cool.
I'm excited to unpack, and what we were saying earlier on tonight is kind of unpacking how you guys have innovated and worked through those barriers of high consideration, high complexity, and then also unpack, about funding and when, why, how. But before we do that, just give us let's just step it back.
Okay.
What's your story? Give us the Dan story.
How far back? I guess.
Where were you born?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll go that far back. Okay.
Yeah.
So born in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. So small town northern kid. Was one of the only Korean, I think the only Korean family growing up in northern Canada. My dad was an architect. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to build things. He said that architecture takes talent and you don't have it. So I decided to be an entrepreneur instead. Started in finance.
That would be the best takeaway for tonight.
Maybe, yeah.
Go into entrepreneurship.
So started in finance. So worked in New York for a number of years on Wall Street doing tech M&A. moved into venture capital, investing in startups, and I loved working with entrepreneurs, but felt like I wanted to be one of them. Be sitting on the other side of the table just felt like I was missing out. And having now been on the other side, there's no, and I'm talking to a group of entrepreneurs, and there's just no other rush than the wins that come along with building a business, and seeing your product in the wild. And every day I drive along, and sometimes I see a Clutch license plate, and I'm like, that's us. That was our team. That's awesome. And so I think that's just so satisfying. And so that's kind of the journey, kind of in a nutshell. But ultimately, really passionate about building teams, really passionate about building consumer products, and landed at Clutch because ultimately cars are your second largest consumer product. And in Canada, there's this giant white space. In the US, there's a bunch of brands around used car retail, and car retail generally. In Canada, there's no brand. I'm not sure where everyone's from, but assuming folks are from across the country, and if I pulled every one of you and said, hey, look, where would you buy a used car? The person that grew up in Montreal versus Vancouver versus Toronto versus Edmonton would say something completely different. Whereas in the US, there's a few brands that people have recognized. And so we thought there was an opportunity to create that cohesive experience around used car buying in this country, for something that is really, really painful. 90% of people hate going to a dealership. Gallup comes out with a poll every year ranking professions on a scale of honesty and ethics. And at the very top is always nurses. At the bottom, used car salespeople. And so thought there was an opportunity there. If you want to go sell a car, you have to go to a Tim Hortons parking lot and meet some stranger and try to haggle for a deal. I mean, this is 2023. There's got to be a better way. And so that was really the genesis of all of this. Spending folks, I have kids, all of you have kids. The idea of going to a dealership and spending 5 hours on a Saturday seems unreasonable, particularly if you have to drag your kids along. And so why not be able to do that from the comfort of your home? And so that's the value proposition that we bring to this industry, and we're trying to change the way that Canadians buy and sell used cars.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
I mean, I think unless a dealership has free hot dogs or something like that.
I love a free hot dog.
I
mean, we'll do anything for free hot dogs.
Especially if it's kid time.
That's right.
No, but in all seriousness, you kind of started with this idea of polling the audience. Hey, would you ever buy a car online? Absolutely not. So did that ever dissuade you from starting this, or what kind of gave you that push to know, nope, there's a pain point here, there's a fear here, there's a frustration, there's a need, I've got to go fill that?
I think that if there's a theme from this conversation, I think one of the themes is you don't know until you try it. And I think there's a lot of things over the course of history, and even kind of the more recent history, around things that seemed insane. Do you want to go jump in someone's random car to get a ride somewhere, or do you want to stay at someone's apartment that you don't know, right? There's a bunch of consumer behavior that 10 years ago seemed crazy at the time. And so I think until you try it, you don't know. And we originally started the model because the industry is so rooted in the belief that test drives are needed to sell a car.
Right.
But if you think about what the reason why consumers will take a test drive is because you don't trust the person selling the thing to you. And the average consumer doesn't know a ton about cars, and getting in the car and driving it down the street really only tells you a few things: that the brakes work, it goes.
It has a blinker.
Well, you can't really see that. The air conditioning blows cold, and what it kind of looks like generally. And so a lot of that, if you trust the person or the company that is selling that to you, can be skipped. And if you have data and the information, and the web and the internet has provided so much of that now, and we can provide these really high definition photos, and we have complete transparency around any imperfection that exists around the vehicle. And so if there's a scratch, you can zoom in on the scratch and see, okay, that's that scratch. And so when the car arrives in your driveway and gets dropped off, you can be like, okay, that meets my expectation or exceeds my expectation because everything was super transparent. And so until you try it, you don't know. And so we were under the belief that you needed a test drive. So we actually embarked on test drives at the beginning. So we had this concierge service where we bring the car to you, you could test drive it, and then if you didn't like it, we'd send it back. Incredibly operationally intensive. And 40 to 50% of the time, the consumer didn't want the car. And so the crazy thing was back in, call it early pandemic, so 2020, Ours is a regulated business, so we have regulators in every province, and so we're a highly regulated business. And because it took us time to get our license, and because of a bunch of regulatory things, they were said, okay, you can't do this anymore because their test drive model actually doesn't fit the regulations. And so we're like, oh, geez, what do we have to do? So this is a little bit reminiscent of Uber. So we actually shut down our test drives because we had to from a regulatory perspective. And then literally the day we did that, our sales started taking off. And so it was funny because I think a bunch of dealers actually caused that to happen.
Yeah.
And so, unbeknownst to them, trying to shut us down actually created an acceleration for us, which was kind of interesting. But consumers, every consumer approaches the world with their own view of with their own experiences, their own view of the world. And so many times I hear people being like, "I would never buy that," right? Or "I would never do that." There's a lot of things I wouldn't buy because I'm not the target market. But there's billions of people in the world, and so just because you personally aren't going to do that doesn't mean that 100 other people will not do something completely different than you. And so until you put it out in the market, it's really hard from a consumer perspective. It's really hard to know whether or not the thing that you're doing actually has signal. And so that's been a big foundational learning for the business, is until you try it, you don't know. And I have a bunch of examples that we can go into, but that's kind of the core of how we think about things is, we have a question around something. Well, why don't we try it and see what happens, right? And see what happens.
I don't think though that is everybody's initial reaction. I think often, and to the entrepreneurs in the room, you're like, heck yeah, we're going to try it. If it fails, okay, we'll go to the next one. But we're kind of weird. A lot of people will look at something and go, there's a risk there. If I fail, how will I look? How will I feel? I'm not going to go there. But sort of around that trust point is like, you knew there was something to meet.
Right.
And you pun intended, you drove at it.
Yeah.
There'll be more. Okay, so
That's the end of we hit our quota. We're out.
so you've launched. You're going. Sales increase when test drives are taken off the table. How do you go about ideating, strategizing, planning, and executing a trust-building movement? Because I think there is, at least in my mind, maybe others here, there is a pretty sleazy outlook on other alternatives, let's say, that are out there of where you would buy or find a used car online.
Tim Hortons parking lot.
Tim Hortons parking lot, or more remote places for others. Don't go there. So what did you and the team talk about? How were you focused on making sure that you could continually build trust, even before you started partnering with big organizations like the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, early on, and I think this applies to every company that's delivering any product, you have to focus on the product. I mean, if you have a great, and for us, it's cars, obviously, so if we have a great car, a really high quality car that you can trust, that, if you want to take right off the lot and drive it across the country, you don't have any, hesitation around that. If you can start with that's core to everything. And so one of the metrics we track religiously is NPS. And so literally anytime anyone fills out an NPS survey, I get a Slack notification. Anytime fills out a Google survey, we get a Slack notification. And so all our Google reviews go to the entire team, and we'll be able to track those on a real-time basis. And we have a very, very fast feedback loop around consumer experience. And we have an NPS of 82, which is quite high. That means 90% of people are rating us either a 9 or 10 in terms of experience. And that's both on the sell side and on the buy side. And so our team has been very committed to product experience and product quality. And if you can start with that foundation, because ultimately we're selling a commodity, and a lot of people are. I mean, there's a lot of different clothing brands and drink brands and, glasses brands. And so you got to differentiate yourself somehow. And for us, it's around quality and experience. And if those are the things that you're focused on, then do everything around the organization to rally the team around those things. And for me, I continue to talk to customers individually, and my team doesn't love that, but I do that just to make sure that I stay connected with the consumer. And every time there's any complaints, right, I'm the one that addresses them. So I think those are important. And I don't do all of them, but I certainly do a subset of them. And I think that connects you to the consumer. It highlights the areas where you need to improve, And it also gives you a feedback loop around what, from a car perspective, what the customers care about and what we don't, and what we need to be able to be more focused on and what we don't need to be focused on. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to dive in with you on this. Speaking of kind of like shifting a little bit into like complexity and consideration. One of the through lines, whether you sell a car through a website, which is probably the extreme case, or whether you're selling clothing, which has complexity, I want to try it on, I want to test drive it.
Yep.
Or it's high consideration, you've got a product that is, isn't just a $10 purchase. How did you guys navigate and innovate through high consideration, high complexity? Because I think that correlates to any brand, right?
Yeah. For us, it's transparency. Again, our website, if you go online, we have 360 spins of the car, that all that technology we built ourselves. We have, we call them hotspots of any imperfections on the vehicle, and so you can really zoom in. But in addition to that, there's a full vehicle history, so there's a Carfax report that you can download immediately. The pricing is transparent. There's no hidden fees. So you look at the pricing, it's like, okay, I'm going to go get this car, and that's what I'm going to pay for it. 9 times out of 10, you walk into a dealership, that's not the price you're going to pay for it.
Right.
And so price transparency, product transparency, and then being very upfront about exactly what product you're serving has been kind of core to everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
From an experience standpoint, that's where partnerships like the NHL have come in handy, where people call us and like, is this thing a scam, right? And you're like, well, we're partnered with the NHL. So if you're a fledgling brand that needs brand trust, we associate ourselves with another trusted brand that helps us kind of use that halo. But ultimately, those are, I would say, secondary to the product and the product quality and the experience that you get online. And again, for us, it's all about transparency. I think that's the thing that, at least in our industry, was lacking. And so that's the thing that we really focused on.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of going into like whether it's a car again or whether it's clothing or whatever it might be, is like understanding what the real barriers are for that product.
Yeah. So if you have, I think the higher end clothing and particularly like technical clothing brands, I think they do a good job on really zooming in on so you can see the fabric quality and you can almost virtually touch it, right?
Yeah.
And I think those things are important. Or you show, the pictures of water beading off like that. I think that is indicative of, okay, this is what this product does in a technical setting, right? And so I think there's ways that companies can highlight product benefits that normally you think are only available in the physical world in an online kind of environment. And I think that's the trick, that being able to translate that really well. There's a few companies out there that have done virtual fittings, particularly in like the glasses space, that I think are pretty impressive from like a tech perspective. And so I think, to the extent that you can highlight the product features that people would want to experience in person virtually, then I think you're better off.
So is that next virtual test
Virtual
drive?
trust drives
with your $4,000 ski goggles?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good idea.
Free idea. So I think the interesting thing for me here, though, high consideration product, but at a certain point, though, the product itself isn't at origin yours.
Yeah.
However, you have a process of reclaiming and repurposing and reframing. It's a lot of re's. That piece to make it more appealing, to connect better, and to build trust outside of that product somewhere else on a completely separate platform, same thing, but the experience and the perception of that is completely different.
Yeah. So again, the hardest thing to do in this industry for us is to price the product or price the good. Used cars, every single SKU that we have is different. So 2 Toyota Corollas are never the same. Every SKU that goes through our process is entirely different. And to price that SKU requires an incredible amount of data. And so we built a really robust data set based on a bunch of machine learning algorithms. And we ingest a bunch of data to be able to spit out a price for your car in a real-time basis so we can acquire those cars from the public. We're now putting about 100,000 offers per month into the Canadian market. And combination of refresh offers and new offers. But we have this funnel of cars that are being priced on a daily basis. And from there, we can then estimate the amount of cost that it's going to require to actually get that car up to our standard. And so we have we call it a clutch standard. Every car that goes through our facility has this 210-point inspection. We'll replace tires and brakes and rotors and windshields and air filters and cosmetic, and we'll do kind of everything that needs to be done on the vehicle that meets our standard. And then we put all of that on our website to make sure that that's communicated. And so we communicate a lot of that. And a big piece of this kind of trust building is this: we have a 10-day money back guarantee. And so, I think hard to do in a lot of industries, but in particularly ours. But if you don't like the car, you just bring it back. And so that's kind of the biggest value proposition is like, hey, look, like it's a big value purchase, but if you don't like it, you can just bring it back. And because our product quality is so high, our return rates are sub 5%.
Really?
Yeah.
That's good. Well, and that's a digging into it. What are the real barriers for the consumer? Hey, and like, how do we go and find a solution for that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and so
and
I think we've done a lot of conversations with customers. And again,
Yeah.
I think that feedback loop that we have, because we're talking to customers every day,
Yeah.
allows us to say, okay, well, these are the pain points, or these are the friction and barriers that the consumer is coming across. Okay, how do we address those things? What's
Yeah.
the issue? And so, we had the 10-day money back guarantee, but we also extended now a 90-day complimentary warranty, because we're like, okay, sure, if something goes wrong in the first 10 days, it's one thing, but like, what about the first 3 months? And generally 3 months, is an adequate amount of time to know whether or not the car is in good condition or not.
Yeah.
No, that's huge. To take the big concerns and fears and barriers, just take them off the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And almost put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
And say, hey, like
Yeah.
if you got a good product, here, like, trust us. Look, it's
Yeah.
going to be great.
Yeah, if you can't stand behind
Yeah.
it, why have the
Right.
So good.
flash and show of it?
We've got just time for a couple more questions here, but I want to just shift us a bit into funding.
Okay.
Totally kind of changing gears. That's second pun. Third. How many times have I said shifting gears today? I don't know. Not intentional.
I've
Okay.
never heard you say
Oh.
shifting
But
gears.
here's one. What? Okay, so if you take the O out of founder, it's basically funder.
Right.
Which
That's
right?
Yeah.
I prepared that one. Well, the founders in the
Genius.
room.
Genius. Genius.
Everyone is leaving. Wow. But so many founders we talk to, right? It's like so much of the role is to go raise funds.
Yeah.
And like it's a funny joke, but it's like legit part of the job, right? So tell us kind of like you spent lots of years in VC, you've raised a ton of capital. What do we learn? Like what do we need to know?
If you can avoid taking capital, avoid taking capital.
It's not where I thought this was going to go.
I unfortunately have a business where every unit that I buy is about $25,000 to $30,000, so I had to take capital. If you do not have that, please do not take capital.
Yeah.
I think the question on whether or not you want to take outside money, I think is really a personal. Well, it's partly a business choice depending on the business you're in, but then after that, it's really a personal choice. If there's the financial outcome of owning 10% of $1 billion business versus 100% of a $100 million business is the same, right? But the $1 billion business requires a bunch of money, and with that comes a bunch of strings, and you lose a bunch of control, and so there is cost to taking money, no surprise.
Yeah.
And so I think if there's any advice, take it wisely, take it when you need it. Spend the time focusing on the fundamentals of the business. I mean, this last 18 months for us as a team and for me personally was probably the most challenging 18 months of my professional career because of the funding landscape.
Wow.
Valuations and e-commerce companies have gone crazy and plummeted, and so there's been a lot of turmoil around the VC landscape, particularly for companies at our stage, so Series B and C and beyond. Yeah. And so if you're not at that stage, great, that's a win. The pressure to grow and the pressure to scale at VC level pace is intense.
Yeah.
It adds to some excitement. But we when we raised our last round, we basically within 6 months hired 300 people, and so what happens then is like you've got 60. We had, I think at one point 70% of the workforce had like less than 3 months of experience.
Wow.
Of our team, and so and you have like new people hiring new people, and then new people trying to train new people, and so you just have like mass chaos and inefficiency. But you kind of go through that phase, and then you have to like reset the foundation. I always tell my team, look, like growing at 4x is actually really hard. Exponential growth for humans is really hard to understand. And so like growing at 4x is, you're doing 100 things today. Now, like this year you're gonna do, 100 things. Next year you got to go do 400 things. And you're like, okay, well, how, like how you were doing those 100 things has to fundamentally change to do 400 things or 500 things.
Yeah.
When you're doing like 10, 20% growth, like conceptually, okay, I'm doing 100 things and next year I need to now do 110 things, right? Like that's like, you can figure out how to do that. And so that is a much less stressful, more peaceful existence in many ways.
Yeah.
Much more efficient. It's much more, not only capital efficient, but it's also just more like people resource efficient. And so my advice is, for anyone who wants to embark on the VC journey, hats off to you. I think, it comes with its challenge, but it also comes with a lot of reward and it could be very rewarding. But if you don't need to take it, there's also something to be said about having, 100% control of your business or near 100% control of the business. And I see folks nodding that are like, yes, I agree with that. And so, I don't think there's a right answer for anyone. And I think really only in hindsight can you like look back and say that was the right answer. But, I think, my advice is that some businesses are more geared towards VC capital. And if that's the case, then maybe that's an avenue that you want to pursue. Others are less so. And so don't try to force it, I would say. And pick your partners wisely. In the same way, we at the dinner we talked a lot about how founder relationship is like, or co-founder relationship is like marriage. Yeah. Or you guys are like married, 15 years strong. Still need a few years.
It's a whole nother podcast unpacking.
Exactly. Yeah. Figure that out. But but your funder, your investor relationships are just as deep. I spend a lot of time with my investors, and I think this last year I probably spent 75% of my time on fundraising and investor related activities.
Wow.
Which is it's important for the business, but it's not like directly contributing to building the business, which for me can be. I think for a lot of folks, myself included, can be frustrating.
Yeah.
I would say that advice is right on the money. So is there a...
How long were you thinking about that one?
Probably about 35
The whole time. The whole time.
I didn't hear a word you said, Dan.
I said funding, and he said, "What pun can I make?"
I love it. I love it.
But there is this sort of, I'll say there's this sort of sex appeal with funding and raising money.
Yeah, it's overrated. It's overrated.
But I think
it's overrated.
That's good.
It's overrated.
I was not expecting that from you.
Really? Okay. It's overrated.
We get into the good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly. I mean, the ability to scale really quickly is super fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I, personally. I mean, given my business, there's actually no other way to really do it.
Yeah.
But there's also maybe grass is always greener. But I look at some of the founders that haven't raised any capital and own 90% or close to 100%, and I'm like, oh, that's nice, right? So there's definitely again. There's pros and cons. I don't think there's a right answer. Every business is unique and has different capital needs and working capital cycles. A lot of half of that 200 was debt in order for us to support the inventory.
Wow.
And so again, I think it's very much a personal choice. After whether or not the business makes sense from a VC landscape or not.
So good. Okay, we got to wrap up.
Okay.
But I want to know if there's any parting wisdom. Any kind of just golden nuggets you want to leave us with, the founders in the room?
I think it's and maybe you've rubbed off on me. I feel like
You can do it.
It's more about the journey than the destination, or maybe more about the drive, I guess.
Yeah,
you gotta have drive. Gotta have drive.
Take the journey.
So,
the road less traveled.
No, I mean, I think I think building businesses is super fun. It certainly has its ups and downs. I think the thing that's I think most people in this room could agree with, and the people you do it with is probably the most important thing. And so pick your partners wisely.
Shotgun.
I think there you go. And so the team that I've been fortunate to surround myself with has been awesome, and so that's made it infinitely more fun. I don't think you shouldn't waste your time trying to make something that doesn't work. So, I would say enjoy the journey. Take the ups and downs for what it's worth. I personally enjoy the adrenaline rush of it all. Like the wins are pretty awesome. The lows suck, but the fact that the lows suck makes the wins more fun. Who knows at the end of this road? Who knows what this all becomes? But if you deliver a great product and you focus on the consumer, our philosophy is that eventually it win.
That's clutch.
Cool.
Just keep the fuel in the tank. One more question.
Yes.
After all of this, architect or entrepreneur?
I guess in many ways I ended up with the best of both worlds. Architects get to build stuff, and we're building something, and maybe it's not a building, but
that's true.
I think my dad's still proud.
Fantastic.
I think he is too.
Oh, Dan, thank you so much.
Cool.
Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Dan Park, the CEO of Clutch.ca, and a fantastic pun maker. Tom.
Not rivaled by Tom, for sure.
Well, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I was holding back.
Yeah,
so good.
Clearly.
We got time for maybe 2-3 questions. If anyone wants to ask Dan a question, I'd love to feel a little AMA. Who's got a clutch question? Yeah.
I'm curious, from your perspective, originally as an investor, and then moving in more as a founder, because you mentioned that it's overrated.
Yeah.
How's your perception changed over time?
Oh man, I mean, if I would be such a better investor now that I've gone. I mean, the amount of founder empathy that I now have versus before doing this is through the roof. So I think that's where, I feel like looking back on my time as a VC, I'm just wow, I could have just been a lot better at that job. It's the VC world is amazing. I think I tell VCs these days who are right now everyone's about profitability. I'm sure people are hearing it, right? It was all about growth and now it's all about profitability. But I always tell VCs, I'm hey, look, if all companies were profitable, you wouldn't have a job.
Right.
So growth is still very important, and there is definitely a world, there's definitely a need, and VCs have sparked so much innovation in not only in this country but in this world. So I think they definitely serve a purpose. But my view is that from an entrepreneur's perspective, I think you get into this, you have a vision for the product, you have a way that you want to do things, and having a bunch of people to answer to requires a bunch of management and a bunch of time, which is, for us, it's worth the trade-off, and it's, definitely something we need to do. But for some other folks, it might not be worth that trade-off. And again, that's kind of where it goes down to personal preference and what you ultimately want to build, and how you want to structure you and your team and your co-founder, how you want to structure your life.
Yeah. Great. That's really good. Good question. Yeah. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah. How are you thinking about AI now? And what are you hoping it can do for your business?
Good question.
So I think speed to product development is going to increase, which I think is really helpful from an iteration standpoint. I think what you see on our website is probably 10% of the technology that we built behind the scenes. So for us, there's an incredible amount of technology that goes into receiving vehicles, tracking where those vehicles are, what amount and what kind of reconditioning is going into that vehicle, and then on the sales side, there's a bunch of automation that happens, and then on the pricing side, that is all driven by machine learning, and we have a bunch of data sets that we parse on a daily basis, and so there's a lot there. I think I don't know. It's so early for Chat, GPT-4 is in its nascency still, and I'm actually very curious to see where this all evolves to, because I almost feel like this is internet in 1998 or 2000, right? It's still, we're just scratching the surface, and so the only thing that I can think of right now, or conceptually use it for, is customer service automation and handling all the volume that we have from people asking questions. And I think you can automate a lot of that, but I feel that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Because in 2001 or 98 or whatever, dial-up internet, you weren't thinking about, okay, can I do a FaceTime call and wear your ski goggles and, download a full-length feature film in 4K to your phone. Like, it's like those things weren't even conceptually possible. So I'm actually like nervous for what GPT-4 can do and beyond, because who knows, right?
Yeah.
Like, I hurt my hand. I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but I asked ChatGPT for a diagnosis, and I think it was pretty good.
That's wild.
I have a delayed hematoma in my hand, so I don't know, at least according to AI. I should probably go see a doctor, but
No.
for now,
Don't do it.
That's what I'm going with. So who knows? Like, I don't know, but I think there's a few use cases where, I think it's really easy to build product. My co-founder basically built a car shuttling app in a week using AI and a bunch of different tools. I don't know how he did it, but he did it, and now it works. And so literally overnight, a year ago we tried to hire a team of 10 people to do this.
Yeah.
That's and then now he literally did it overnight using a bunch of the off-the-shelf tools. And so I guess who knows? I don't know. We'll see.
So good. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to keep us on track. I know there's probably lots of great questions. Catch Dan before he heads out tonight. Let's give it up one more time for Dan Park, Clutch.ca. Before we go, and of course, my fearless co-founder,
What's happening?
Thomas
Yeah.
J. Holmes Culver. That's weird. Now people will hack your banking. They know your middle name.
Just the initials.
Just a couple quick thank yous before we go. Again, thanks to Rewind and Rebuy for helping put on this night. It's weird to thank PB&J because that's us, but thanks
thank yourselves.
PB&J, we put this on.
Well, thank you, PB&J.
There you go. There you go. Thanks, Dan. And the big Ashley and Alex and Amber, the Soho staff that pulled this off. Thank you very much. We got Lewis and Jason and Dan. We got the whole crew, and we've got you. Thank you for coming out. Thanks for coming out to the chef's table. Soho House Toronto. Actually, I think contractually I'm not allowed to say Soho House Toronto, so
said
we'll
it 3
have
times now.
to edit that out. But
Bleep, bleep, bleep.
bleep, bleep, bleep. We are not here. Thank you so much. Desserts coming out. There's drinks. You don't have to wait. We can stay here for a bit. Have some desserts, have some drinks, make some connections, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thank you.